Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome to today's session on building sustainable societies through farm to fashion concept. Our speaker for the evening is Professor Vinay Bhushan Jaina, Professor Fashion Management Studies Department, NIFT Bhubaneswar. He is a thinker, a philosopher, and a wonderful teacher all at the same time. Making the campus green was a requirement, but making it green with a systematic design approach was indeed a tough job. With a lot of efforts, he was able to establish a self-sustainable ecosystem that has now garnered attention throughout the globe. Let's hear more about this from the curator himself. We welcome you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Lipsa, for all your kind words. First of all, before I begin, let me thank the Institute and particularly my department, and especially Professor Lipsa and Dr. Saha for inducing me to talk on this particular concept of farm to fashion that has now been integral to our campus NIFT Bhubaneswar. In fact, farm to fashion, as it is recognized today as a model associated with our campus again, NIFT Bhubaneswar, is absolutely nothing new that we have given to the world. Our forefathers have created different systems for us. If you look at the history of this country and history of the civilizations, our own people have contributed tremendously, not only for the development of the civilization, but along with, they have contributed immensely in every possible field, including textiles and clothing. From the Vedic era to Indus Valley civilization, we have seen how people of this particular region lived with nature. It's like nurturing nature. They never considered themselves as masters of the nature or masters of the universe. And today, whatever crisis we are facing, because of our own activities, our own behavior, or our own systems, it is because we have forgotten those systems and pushed it to the corners, believing that development has a different perspective altogether. And in the name of development, we have almost reached to a catch-22 situation. Textiles and fashion is the second largest polluting industry in the world. We all know. We say that after petrochemicals only. But if you look at the industry itself, I mean textiles and fashion industry, it's not the second, it should be the first one in terms of its massive impact, particularly polluting the soil, water, and air. Why? Because more than 65% of all your fibers today used in the textile industry are from petrochemical sources. Similarly, 99.9% of the dyes used today are from the synthetic sources, are again from the petrochemical sources. So if you're considering that, I believe that it's not the second, it's the first, the largest polluting industry in the world. And we are a part of that system. As a 35-year-old institution, probably we have not paid attention to something which is in our history and in our heritage. At this backdrop, an opportunity was created through an universal training program a couple of years back. All our faculty members went there and decided, so each center, each NIFT center should come up with their own vision, with their own USP. And what we found is NIFT is not surrounded by the industries. We don't have that locational advantage what other institutions do have, like Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai, and Hyderabad and other campuses. But I was wrong. Again, we evaluated, we found we have a lot of resources and very, very unique resources. That is how we went ahead and came up with our own concept and thought of integrating the handloom base of the state with fashion. Further to that, we decided to set up a center of sustainable fashion. Along with, we invented or we introduced the term called farm to fashion, whereby the objective is to integrate the entire eco-friendly fashion value chain. Today, it's not about one company competing with the other. It's not about one brand competing with the other or one ideology competing with the other. It's about one value chain competing with the other value chain. Fashion is a big business. It's a multi-trillion-dollar business. We all know that people say if you bring in all aspects of fashion, it's around $3 trillion. In a $3 trillion business, if you take any conservative estimate of what would be the quantum of eco-friendly fashion business, it's again about $300 to $400 billion. And why it is happening? Because of the environmental consciousness, the rise in the environmental consciousness because of different campaigns by different lobby groups and our consistent engagement to integrate environmental conscience with business. Taking back to 1972, again, the year when I was born, I always refer to that because that's a reference point for me. Stockholm Conference, when for the first time the world or the international community recognized that environmental issues must not be neglected. It must be integral to the business. Then it went up, up to another 20 years. We came up with the Rio conference, the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. There we recognized, we consolidated the issues. Then we thought of making roadmaps so that we can actually integrate the environmental issues and concerns into our actions, our business plans. Then came Rio 20 in 2012. Then we have the UNDP, UN Development Goals, which was about, there were 8 goals to achieve by 2015. Similarly, now we are working on the 17 goals set by Sustainable Development Goals of United Nations, which is to be achieved by 2030. If you look at all the goals, from goal number 1 to eradication of poverty to the goal number 17, I find in the model that we are talking about, farm to fashion, that can take care of goal number 1 to goal number 13. And most interestingly, our focus is only on goal number 12, it's responsible production and consumption. What is responsible production and consumption? And if you look at the chaos created by the industry deliberately, the paid media, paid researchers, the entire world is revolving around recycling, reduce, reuse, and recycling. They're not talking about how to get rid of this petrochemical based raw materials or products, which are very much detrimental for the planet, the Mother Earth. Nobody, and none of the top brands in this world, they're also talking about integrating what is actually sustainable into their business systems. And I found how people use different terminologies interchangeably, like environment friendly, eco-friendly, green, circular, ethical. I don't know how there are many new terminologies being used. And there's no certification what is green, what is called eco-friendly, or what is sustainable fashion in the world. And every brand, through their CSR activities or through their CSR reporting, they're promising to deliver something which is sustainable. Is it actually sustainable? Can you talk about your system, how you made it sustainable? At this backdrop, we thought, why should not we offer something that is actually sustainable and very much ingrained in our own traditions, heritage, and society? Another anecdote, 1857, the year we had a revolt against the British, the Sipai Mutiny. The same year we invented the synthetic dyes, the woven dye. What were you doing before that? It was all natural. Natural dyes were used. We knew how to extract natural dyes, how to apply natural dyes. And what are the sources of natural dyes? Either it is from a plant, different parts of a plant, or from mineral sources, from insects, or sometimes from animals. Where is the art today? What does it exist today? Who killed it? We never ask this question to ourselves. And when the world is talking today about eco-friendly fashion, who has got capabilities to offer that? This is the only one country in this world. We have never, ever left our tradition. Handloom was predominantly practiced in the entire Asian region, but it is now confined to this country. More than 90% of all the handloom produced in the world is produced in India. And we never used any other raw material other than the natural fibers. Depending on the region, we used local variety of cotton, linen. Some people argue that you don't produce linen? Who says? Our forefathers, they produced linen, and from the Vedic era we have history, and even we have remnants. We found it in the Mohenjo-daro to, in Coromandel Coast. We have a history of producing linen and using it in our fabrics. And we had also the art of using other natural fibers, whether it is jute, kapok, even sisal, banana, bhindi, kenaf, nettle. We had all those art, but it's a lost glory now. So as also natural dyes. And again, similarly, the animal-based fiber. We never troubled anything. We never exploited the nature, whether it is animal fur or fiber, or it's about silk. We never used any cruel method even to extract fiber for our own use. That is how the system was most sustainable, ethical, and ecologically very balancing and very sound. And today the world needs this the most, because you do not have practices. Then we have also concerns whether the fashion business models that we see today are inclusive or not. Is your fashion business inclusive? You are at a receiving end. Look at the value chain of the fashion. Pick up the top brands of the world. How the profits are distributed in the value chain for each actor, those who are participating in their own value chain. It is very, very discriminatory. It is exploitative. So why can't we have an inclusive system or inclusive value chain? So any business model, for me, to be actually sustainable must stand on 4 different pillars. And those 4 pillars, people say 3 pillars. I say 4 pillars. It has to be socially equitable. It has to be financially viable. And it also has to be environmentally sustainable. But one more angle, one more aspect, or one more pillar, they never included, particularly the modern business world didn't include, is that it has to be economically equitable. It's not about people sitting at the fag end of the business, like a brand, let's say Nike. What Nike is doing, how the profits are distributed for the actors of the value chain of Nike. Just go and do a little analysis of that. You'll see that about more than 60% of the profits goes to Nike. The rest 40% goes to all other actors in the value chain. Is the value chain equitable? So if it is not equitable, it cannot be sustainable also. Why the Indigo movement happened in this country? Why Gandhiji picked up that in 1917? 1915, he came to India, came back from South Africa. 1917, the Champaran movement was there. Why it happened? We need to revisit our history to understand the resources that we do have, the capabilities, the skills, the techniques, the methods that we or our forefathers used. So at this backdrop, we introduce this concept of farm to fashion, believing that institutions must play important roles today to give a shape to the emerging issues and concerns, or to integrate the emerging issues and concerns into business models. And we create human resources predominantly. But along with it, we also talk about business models. If you really want to offer something which is sustainable or eco-friendly, based on our own available resources, what should you do as an institution? Who knows about the art of extracting natural dyes from which plants, which part of the plant, and what is the methodology to extract plants, and what is the methodology to apply natural dyes, so as also natural fibers? How do you do? If I ask my students, so have you seen linen plant? And some people get confused with whether linen or flax are the same thing or not. So how do they do when they talk about sustainability in the industry? Once they pass out from an institution, a prestigious institution like NIFT, if they do not have fundamental information or knowledge about what is sustainable and what is not, then they cannot contribute. So to make themselves effective, to make themselves take leadership positions in the industry, it was very much important for institutions like us to bring in something like this, where we can actually integrate the entire eco-friendly fashion value chain. It's not for the purpose of production, whereby we can only show them, I will demonstrate how to integrate. With this premise, what we did, we went around the entire state to understand what are the different local varieties of dye-yielding plants available in the state. We visited every district and tried to understand from every cluster. We have got 72 clusters in this state. Forget about the entire country. We have got more than 500 clusters. So every nook and corner, we try to figure out who are the people, whether there is anyone who is left who understands how to extract natural dyes from different plant sources. Probably Kotpad is the only living legend. They use this Morinda citrifolia, the Indian mother, the red dye. But how about the other dyes? We have about more than 200 plants from which we can extract natural dyes without affecting the environment, without putting any pressure on the environment. And all these plants are not only biodegradable, but most of the plants are climate resilient plants. You don't need fertilizers, you don't need pesticides, you don't need much water. Even this is true for indigo also. People come up with myth that indigo brings an infertility to the soil, but actually it's not. You go with a crop rotation with the right patterning of the cropping, it never affects your soil. So today we have got about more than 60 different varieties of dye yielding plants in our campus. So as also we have got 10 different varieties of natural fiber yielding plants in our campus. Some are seasonal, which you grow every season, obviously, and some are, regular plants like kapok and all. It's difficult these days to find local variety of cotton. You go and you won't find it anywhere because most of the cotton that we produce in this country is BT cotton. So how a BT cotton is different from local variety of cotton? To understand that, you have to come to an NIT Bhubaneswar campus. I'm not joking. You won't find a local variety of cotton these days. Go anywhere, and you know the impact that is made through the cotton farming. Cotton is not a sustainable crop anymore. It requires huge amount of water, chemical fertilizers and pesticides. And for local variety of cotton, you don't need that much of water. You don't need pesticides. You don't need fertilizers. And it can actually give you those balls, cotton balls, 3-4 times. I mean, continuously for 3-4 years even. But why people left it in the name of yielding more, or in the name of productivity and all, we switched to BT cotton, thinking about to make more money. But we think differently. So at NIFT Bhubaneswar, this is the only campus now in the world where we can at least bring in demonstrations for the entire eco-friendly fashion value chain. You can go and touch and feel what is a kenaf fiber, or what is a rami fiber. How does an indigo plant look like? What part of the indigo we use to extract natural dyes? What is a seashell fiber? What is a pineapple fiber? Although we are at a very, very primitive stage, again, we are yet to get our other resources for further processing and integrating into our academic systems, but we are in the process. And thanks to our directors, he has been we have rainwater harvesting facilities, and we are trying to create an ecosystem. You can see mulberry plantations and plantation of Arjun and Ashen trees in the campus. You can see honeybees in the campus, and bees are an essential element of our ecosystem. Yeah, I mean, we have got 5 different, five honeybee boxes. We had problems initially for pollination and all, and we could hardly see plants flowering and all. So this, so this, we got, and this plant, these honeybees, bee boxes actually helped us in pollinating, and we see the results today. We have got, as I said, mulberry plantations. We have planned for a mulberry silk rearing facility in the campus. So as also tosser rearing facility. We'll go for ahimsa silk. So sorry, and think the internet appears to be a little unstable today. I don't know. So we have created different facilities, and it's a complete ecosystem that has been created in this, which is absolutely unique, and you won't find it anywhere else in the world. We have institutions, those who are offering programs in sustainable fashion. All the top fashion schools are offering programs and short courses in sustainable fashion. But if you look at their programs or their courses, nowhere they talk about integration of the value chain, and the curriculum is much about the concept which is again revolving around recycling and all. But we are different. We are thinking differently. And if we start doing this, actually integrate this into our academic systems and start imparting trainings for the weavers and the other members of the value chain, nobody can stop us becoming a global leader in sustainable fashion. And today only we have grabbed the opportunity of, about 38 billion dollars of exports in textile and clothing. Alone through these eco-friendly textiles, if we bring in natural dyes and natural fibers into our handlooms, we can create a market for nothing less than $150 billion or $200 billion today. It's not only about a market, it's about replacing something. It's about giving leadership to the world. Let other people to follow you. There are smaller organizations, those who have been contributing, like NGOs like Avni and all in the Himalayas. They're doing really, exceedingly well, as although the focus is very much limited into something, but still they're doing a very credible job. So we're taking instances from them, we're learning from everybody and trying to bring in what is actually sustainable into the systems. And the most important part is training and giving a feel of what is sustainable fashion about the entire value chain. It's nowhere visible. It's only, you can see it in the campus, our campus. So I think this is a pride, and this is something that we all must, take ownership to make it more effective, to inform the world that what is actually sustainable and what is not. And the benefit has got far-reaching, positive consequences for the entire economy and the world. And the value chain actors, each and every actor, would get due respect in terms of social and economic. I was analyzing the value chain of Kotpad handloom, not now, what it was before, 100 years, 150 years back. Absolutely, it was not only sustainable, but it was economically equitable. Every actor in the value chain used to get the due share, which is not seen in case of the business models that we see in these days. So we are trying to create a model which is not only, as I said, environment friendly, but socially, economically equitable and financially viable. This is the core philosophy of Farm to Fashion. I think I have taken a hell lot of your time, and if you have any questions, I stop myself here, because please do not consider this as either as a lecture or as a speech, because I talk extempore.
पहले ना आपको बना दो, चाय बना दो, अभी 7:30 बजे हमारा एक क्लास है, चाय बना दो.
Thank you, Professor Lipsa, and if you have any questions, thank you.
I request people to mute themselves. Thank you, sir. The floor is open for questions now.
Good evening, sir. I myself, Devjit Nandi, Deputy Director of Textiles. Just I have only one question. Can I ask now?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, as sir, as you told regarding value chain. while
Right.
we are cropping the plants for anything for raw material like fiber,
Right.
so fiber is the one part. Then
Right.
also we have to go for value addition for fiber
Right.
to get more aesthetic value and comfort value.
Right.
So in that case, we are using the process of desizing, scouring, bleaching, mercerization, finishing, in fact, sometimes printing also.
Right.
So there, whatever the chemicals we are using, do you think it belongs to eco-friendly? Number one.
Right.
Number two,
Hmm.
in the process of dyeing also, color, in case of coat part is one part very nice. I feel also it is totally eco-friendly process. But in case of other colors, whatever the chemicals we use, do you think government has banned some chemicals? And what is the alternative for using chemicals for giving value addition in dyeing in those natural dyeing process?
Thank you, Randy sir, and a very interesting and pertinent question. And let me answer the first one. In fact, the process of extraction, if you look at all the bast fibers or the leaf fibers, or even the balls that were cotton, like the lean fiber, cotton or kapok or so, we have a history of, we have never used any chemicals for the extraction, even for processing. We using terminology, let's say scouring. What is a scouring? It is not scouring, we're actually scaring people. By inventing certain terminologies, scouring is taking out the impurities probably, if you look at the entire process and demystify it, what is the meaning of these terminologies used in the jargons used in the entire textile processing? And how we were in the past, in the Vedic era, and after that also we didn't have anything. In the Mughal times, we didn't have any chemicals. So how do we do that? We are trying to revisit that. And certain, let's say, salt like alum or so for mordanting and all, that's okay, because you are taking it from the mother earth directly. It's not a processed one that you are using in your in the process of extraction or application of dyes or fibers. So today, let's say the people are talking about the mechanical rating of the fibers, jute or linen or so. So linen, it's okay. We can do that. But in Odisha, let's say a place like Odisha, where jute is a very different crop altogether. And look at the practices for ages, what we have been doing. We have never used any chemicals. And so is also with the cotton. And while when talking about the second part of your question about extraction of natural dyes and application again, I don't think we need that. We need any chemicals. The government has definitely put bans like Aju and other dyes, but certainly not on the natural dyes. Even some toxic dyes, I tell you, let's say kancha, if you eat, it will die. But you extract dyes and apply it on your cloth, it is no more toxic. It is rather eco-friendly and friendly to your skin. There's so many other, if you eat even annatto seed, probably you die. You would fall sick. But when you're extracting dyes, it's not, you're not going to die. And it has, it's not, the plants, these are very, very interesting plants. Look at safflower or safflower, or look at even indigo, or look at, even sunflower or. So none of these plants which give us natural dyes are toxic in nature. And you really don't need any chemicals for the dyes to be fixed on the fiber of the fabric. Don't need that. And there are many natural processes, archaic processes, which yet to be documented, discovered. Some people have started doing it. And some institutions, or if you look at Turkey, and there is an institution in one university, which is a Germany funded institution way back in the early 90s. They started with a center for developing natural dyes and all. And they're really doing good. And although they have not got all those practices what this part of the country, this part of the world has been doing. So my one very basic knowledge says that we don't need any chemicals, whether it is for extraction or application of natural fiber or natural dyes. Even the myth around plantation of these crops, natural dyes or natural fibers can affect your soil fertility is also a myth. And the issues which were something different probably has been associated with something else in the history. 1917, as I talked about the Champaran movement, they were not getting their due share. The farmers are not getting their dues. They will go for indigo plantation, but they won't get anything. They were compelled to go for plantation when they can. They were starving because they cannot grow their own crops, food crops like wheat or paddy or something else. At the same time, they were also not paid. And just imagine, in any, we're not talking about any arable land, you go for any wasteland and go for indigo plantation. In 1 acre, you can at least harvest 5,000 kilograms of leaf, which can, give you around 50 to 60 kilograms of indigo. Indigo powder or indigo cake, good quality indigo cake. It's around 3,000 rupees because we are buying from retail 3,500 to 4,000 rupees. And the lowest variety is about 2,500 rupees per kilogram. The natural indigo I'm talking about. So how much a farmer can get per annum from 1 acre of land, whether this is profitable or not. Just imagine 50 kilogram to 60 kilogram, just on an average 50 kilogram per acre. 50 multiplied by 3,000, 1,50,000. How many? This is about one season. Your cropping pattern is about June, July to October. 4 months you can harvest indigo. And the rest of the year you go for other plants. Do a plant rotation. Nobody stops you. And what is the process of extraction of indigo? The same rating and what you were doing at, the rating of the bast fibers and all. Fermentation, then you need water. It consumes a lot of water. But that wastewater is also not that toxic. That doesn't spoil your soil. So we need to do a lot of research here, and I am sure that I also need to, document, need to learn more about the processes, the practices that we had before. So I'm here to come up with, and my colleagues, my friends have been writing. All my, faculty colleagues are essentially busy writing research papers on sustainable fashion, and I'm sure that tomorrow, at least we'll have more about, the do's and don'ts, and what to do, what not to do about the natural fibers or natural dyes, as far as its extraction and application is concerned. So I think I answered your question. If not, I can
Yes.
still engage. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Only thing is that IIT Delhi has done a lot of research works on natural dyes. 20 years back, Professor M.L. Golrajani, sir.
Yes,
and
sir. Yes,
All industry is there in Ghaziabad, who is
yes,
now
sir.
producing the powder from natural dyes.
Right, sir. I know even Kanpur also, IIT Kanpur also, because they started offering a program on natural dyes. I think long back. These days they're not doing it. So they're really doing a good job. Credible job.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sir,
Yes.
there is a question from Director, sir. regarding organic cotton, difference between organic cotton and ethical cotton.
Oh, wonderful.
Are they same or they are different?
Thank you, sir. Ethical cotton and organic cotton are two different concepts. Ethical cotton is more about the social aspects of the cotton. Normally, what happens in a cotton field, the farmers are underpaid and they use child labor. So you go to Uzbekistan and many parts of Africa, whether it's Central Africa, or the Chad and other countries where we grow cotton. Most of the times you would find it's very discriminatory in terms of exploitations of the laborers. And so we say that, and that is more about the social aspects of cotton farming. So they say that it has to be, these people must be well paid, and the laborers must be well paid. The farmers must get the due share, like whether in terms of an MSP or a kind of buyback, like we do have MSP in our country. And similarly, also, you should not engage child laborers and all in cotton farming, particularly during the time of picking and harvesting. And so most of the countries, the underdeveloped countries, they use, those who go for hand picking of cotton, they use child labor. And now it is banned, and they're also equally underpaid. So this is what, like BCI, Better Cotton Initiative and all, and they have come up with, concepts like ethical cotton sourcing. But when it comes to organic, the concept of organic is more about the technical side of doing cotton production without using chemical fertilizers and pesticides, which have got negative impacts, tremendous negative impact on the environment, including use of water and all. So let's say that producing one cotton t-shirt, we almost consume 2,700 liters of fresh water. Absolutely, I mean, not environment friendly. And when you talk about organic cotton, that really consumes just less water and it doesn't consume any chemical fertilizers, don't need any chemical fertilizers and pesticides. And we have that interesting history. Even today also, you at least find 5% of our cotton is local and organic. I mean, organic because the farmers cannot afford to buy fertilizers or pesticides. And they go for plantations for their own use only. It was never meant for selling into the open market. So this is how these two things are treated differently. Yes, sir.
So BT cotton will be more of organic rather than ethical, right?
Sir, BT is not all organic, sir. Sir, look at
BT
sir,
because that
sir,
is a genetic modification.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So it's not organic also. It's either organic.
It is not ethical. Organic. Yes, sir, not ethical. Because BT, sir, if you look at the amount of, you see, you must have visited, sir, the BT cotton sites. You look at the ground itself. You cannot grow even see any grass on the ground, sir. They use first a chemical to kill the grass on the ground in order to grow that plant. Then the amount of pesticides they put on the plants at different times, and the amount of fertilizers they use to grow that. And every time, it's not about the soil fertility that goes down, but you have to, for the next crop, you have to use more fertilizers and more pesticides. And the
even
impact
the seeds
on
also.
Yes, sir, seeds also. And
yeah,
nearby plants,
the seeds will lose their reproductive ability also.
Capabilities. Yes, sir. And similarly, people, those who are doing organic, let's say, along with your field, I have another field where I'm growing something else. So since it is BT and you are using pesticides and chemical fertilizers, all the insects and the pests will come to my field.
For
So
our campus, where from you are sourcing these original cotton
Sir,
seeds?
Cottons are from villages, and in fact, where I see those
Okay,
plants,
great.
they have been practicing, so got those plants, sir.
Great. Right.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
So there is one info.
Yeah, Professor Lipsa.
May
Yes.
I?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so there is one more
Please.
information given by our alumnus, Mr. Tapas Modi, that many fair trade organizations are looking for natural dyes right now.
Yes.
So the certification recommendations are being given on the basis of the dyes that people are using, the brands are using, and probably it has a good future that we can see.
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, there are a lot of, I mean, the dye sources. You look at the, take for example, indigo. Indigo in the northern regions of this country, and indigo in Odisha or Bihar or West Bengal. The quality of indigos vary from region to region because of the climatic conditions. The quality and the properties of the dye stuffs. So as also linen, people say that the best linen in the world is produced in Belgium. It's such a tiny country, just imagine. And Europe probably contributes about 80% of the linen production. It is also equally one of the best variety of linen in the world. What we have been doing. We must say that this is the best one that we have ever invented, the world has ever seen. Let them disprove us. They do not have any ground, and you are only a 200, 300, 500 year civilization. This is a 5,000 year civilization. So how do you say that this has been invented? And some people say that natural fibers and natural dyes and or something which is discovered or invented in Mesopotamia or Iraq or Iran or somewhere else. And when you revisit our own scriptures, particularly the Vedas, you really wonder that all those things are very much integral to our systems. Everything. It's all about rediscovering that and advocating and vouching for that. So we have to create a strong community who can really vouch for Indian traditions, Indian methods of creating sustainable societies, sustainable products. So thank you. It's interesting, and the Tapas is right. The global market for natural dyes is actually rising very, very fast, but there are no takers. People don't go for plantations. We can create thousands of acres of, or hundreds of thousands of acres of plantation of mehendi or even indigo or marigold. Or, I mean, the basic dye stuffs that we can easily extract. And these are the possibilities. We can bring in a lot of change in this country and can also do justice to the farmers and can allow the countryside to contribute to the so-called, the vision of the Prime Minister, it's a $5 trillion economy by 2025. If really we're thinking in this direction. And by 2030, by the time we talk about, we evaluate SDGs, what we have achieved in this 15 years time. So I think we should expedite all our processes and fasten our belt to really do something and show something that this farm to fashion concept has got power to address all 13, out of the 17, 13 goals of the SDGs. You please, I may request all of you to visit these 17 goals and see how it can be. This is interconnected with our concept.
Mr. Devjit Nandi, perhaps is Deputy Director of Directorate of Textiles, right?
Yes, sir.
Is he still there in this virtual assembly?
Nandi sir, you're there. Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Nandi sir.
Yeah. Mr. Nandi, can you please enlighten me whether the research work or whatever outcome has come out of IIT Delhi or IIT Kanpur or elsewhere regarding this natural dye research or natural dye production anywhere? As you said, the powder form it has come out, but they have stopped or they are still continuing.
Sir, actually, during the year 1995, Professor Gulrajani was the professor IIT Delhi, and he was deputed to one project to Alf Industries. So there he worked for 5 to 6 years. with a team of his students, research scholars, and they could able to develop certain products in natural dyes, which could be commercially produced in the industry, the ALS industry, Ghaziabad. I have also personally visited the industry. The industry is producing powder form of the natural dyes. And in that case, now small industries, they are also coming forward for the so indigo, like Tide, Manjista, and Catechu, but those are very less. But commercially, I think the ALS industry is producing the dyes, but they are also going for fiber dyeing. They are not selling in the open market. What they are doing is that they are having one plant for vegetable dyes and one plant for fiber, and they are converting fiber into dyed and dyed fiber form, and they are going for export. That I had seen that time. But today I don't know. I'm not too much aware about the further progress actually, sir.
Okay, what are the names of those industries which had been on to commercial production of this natural dyes?
No, ALS industry Ghaziabad. Then in the supplier from Kolkata, there are 5, 6 suppliers are there. At present, I don't have the list, but I can give you the list who are supplying the natural dye in powder form. That I can give you, sir. I'm having the list.
Any idea about production of naturally colored cotton? Like while I was studying in Serampur, Calcutta University, there itself I found my professors were showing us 3 different colored cotton genetically modified so that the dyeing process is totally eliminated. There was brown cotton, green cotton, the seed what itself was genetically modified. So the chemical effect of dyeing is eliminated.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That has some works have been done, and commercially also certain countries are producing this dyed fiber form. But sir, actually, while I was studying in UDCT, Professor Teli, MD Teli, you may be knowing him, and he was doing a lot of works on natural dyeing. I think, sir, then UDCT has come forward with some industry. Let me collect the information. Then some industries are there. They are actually, sir, producing dyes in powder form for natural dyes. I have to just collect the information, sir. Just now I am not having.
Yeah. Please do it and let Dr. Jenabi send such information, and
Yes,
let us see what can be done, because it is Dr.
Actually,
Jena's
yes.
thought process has gone into realization now. Perhaps we are about to start this Center for Sustainable Fashion. That should have all these kind of research, whatever Professor, I forgot his name, Professor of IIT Delhi. If at all they have done so much things, then we can at least gain some lessons from
Insights.
them.
but after that,
So it should not.
Professor
Yes.
Gulraj written a book on natural dyes. Very, very interesting book. That book is available with the WSC Bhubaneswar. Weaver Service Center Bhubaneswar.
Okay.
Mr. Patra is there,
Okay.
SK Patra,
Yes.
deputy director. He is having that book. I had also book with me. Just now I have to collect the book. And sir, in Odisha, we are running one big project on promotion of Kotpad handloom products. In state government, we are implementing one scheme for revival of also language designs using Kotpad.
It was not
So
audible.
that
For revival of what? Kotpad research or what?
there are 2 projects we are having. One is the revival of languishing designs, where Kotpad is one aspect, and also in another project, we are implementing one scheme called production of natural dye products using your AL and other sources of dye stuff available in Odisha.
Okay. Is there any Kotpad research center or specific research centers for Kumkum or Similitula or something like that?
Sir, in South Kerala, there are so many institutions, but not in Odisha actually. So far, my knowledge is concerned. In Kerala, there are so many small entrepreneurs. They have come forward and they have developed certain success stories for development of natural dye products in Kerala.
Anyway,
And Andhra Pradesh also.
good. So yeah, Dr. Jana, let us call Mr. Nandi
Nandi,
to
sir.
our
Yes,
campus for a discussion how to go about this, especially whatever information and other details he has. Let us
Yes, sir.
go and let us go about it. Yeah.
Yes, sir. He himself is a great repository of I mean, sir, he has tremendous knowledge about the natural dyes and
Okay,
natural fibers.
okay.
He
Okay,
understands
great,
many things, sir.
great,
I am limited knowledge.
He's a wonderful resource, sir.
great, great, great.
Yes, sir.
Okay, please continue. Yeah.
And two people, one more,
So,
and even
thank you so much for
Patra
all
sir
the
and
inputs, and it was a powerful
thank you.
discussion that happened right now. Is there any more questions? Okay.
Hello, Jena sir. This side Manas here.
Yeah, Manas, please. Yeah.
Sir, actually, as we were discussing about natural fibers, I would like to know that how do you look onto the perspective of PETA claiming that cruelty towards silkworm while silk production, as they claim that female moths are crushed to death after mating, like even male worms as well. So how do you look onto the sustainability of the in terms of livelihood for the persons involved in this production? So
Right.
if you can,
See, two things do happen. If you have seen the process of, growing or the sericulture, whether it is mulberry, tosher, or tosher is the wild variety, but tosher, erier, muga, all the varieties of silk. Concern is PETA talks about, mm, I mean, cruelty against animals, right? Or you say ethical treatment of animals. So while extracting something from the nature, whether it's animals or plants or so, our objective is to to fetch minimal what you harm to the nature and to the insect or the plant itself, from where we extract whatever we extract for our own use. So in case of the silkworms, when they make the cocoon, they reside inside the cocoon for some time. After that, when they mature and they move out of this, the cocoon, they can move out, and the cocoon obviously it cannot be used for reeling the silk, right? Which is like in case of a tosher silk, if you pull out that string, that filament, it goes up to 1.5 kilometers, right? And if it is, I mean, as you know that if you allow the moth to move out of the cocoon, then it's all about gicha, and then you have to go and spin and it's a difficult process again, right? But what is more important, your comfort or your nature? So there is a trade-off. We have to look at the trade-off between these two. For us, it is the ahimsa silk, the gicha, which is more important. But interestingly, that moth, when it moves out, that also doesn't survive in the nature. The moment it moves out, there are predators around, and they eat these most of these moths, the butterflies or so, right? But in my concern, or if you look at what PETA is advocating for, we're not doing any cruelty. When you boil the cocoons to take out the filament out of it, then obviously it's a very painful process. I also don't like. So even Bhubaneswar campus also is talking only about ahimsa silk. Even if you grow silk in the campus, we'll go for ahimsa silk, 100% ahimsa silk. We'd never kill the moth.
sir,
And
I would
it's
also
against
like to add on to this. Yes, sir. Sir, as you told
yeah.
that the silk moves out of the cocoon and they start like the next process they follow up. But PETA also claims that there is no proper certification regarding this process. People still follow the conventional process of like producing silk, but they they claims that don't be fooled by this ahimsa silk. So how like is it? How do you see onto this, like whether, as you told that this is there are two things comes there, one is comfort and the other one is regarding nature. So how do you
Yeah.
feel or look onto this in terms of
Right. See, first of all, we do not actually have any certification for ahimsa silk. even not for eco-friendly fashion also. Globally, you don't have one specific or single standard which can be applicable across the globe. We don't have created. So I think this is an opportunity for this country to take initiatives and leadership in this, so that we can come up with certifications, because we do have everything, all the resources. If we cannot create the standards in order for to get the certification, or to create how to get something certified, I think the no other country can do this. And we should not wait for others to certify or to create a certification mark for Ahimsa Silk or so, because it doesn't prevail in any other country in the world. So if PETA is saying that we are fooling people around, so let them come forward. Why they should not suggest the government to come up with a certification? We have rug marks, we have wool marks, we have every silk mark, we have handmade mark, handloom mark. So why can't we have a certification mark talking about Ahimsa Silk or eco label or eco-friendly fashion? So who should be? So once we start this exercise at our campus, I'm sure this would trigger. I mean, yesterday only the government of Odisha has declared something very interesting for the artisans, for the handloom weavers. Similarly, the government of India is also taking measures that have realized the importance of handloom in this country. Okay, I'm sure that these things, these are all integral part of the fashion industry. And if you cannot align them with the concept of eco-friendliness or farm to fashion, then we cannot create a robust system for ourselves. So once you create a system and don't need a certification, you come and see the process. We'll invite people to come, invite the global community to to notice how we produce eco-friendly fashion. We never kill the moth.
Okay,
Kantia,
so
thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
The role of a moderator is equally difficult. And I have to say that we have already crossed our time limit, and it is it is time to say goodbye. But before that, just few words about the session, sir. Yes, we have to create mini ecosystems that continues to sustain itself, whether it is our Ayurveda garden, textile fiber garden, or natural dye garden. We welcome you all to visit NIFT Bhubaneswar to see such an ecosystem thriving full-fledged. To add to our pride, the ideas of Professor Jena have been accepted and welcomed by a Parliamentary Standing Committee on Labour as a national policy and a national movement. In near future, we look forward to create a Center for Sustainable Fashion at NIFT Bhubaneswar under the able leadership of Professor Jena. I take this opportunity to thank our current director, Mr. Sovan K. Sahu, IRS, for his consistent efforts towards establishing the center. And lastly, a big thank you to Professor Jena to ideate and give shape to such a burning issue. Thank you, sir, for this endearing, thought-provoking, and powerful session. Thank you so much. We say
bye. Thank you so much.
We have come to the end of the session. I now request Kathy to please end the session. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.